10mm versus 44 Magnum, and today we have our Hornady LEVERevolution ammunition. So I knew this existed in like 357 Magnum, 44 Magnum, and other rifle calibers, but I had no idea that it existed in 10mm. I was at a local store and I saw that sitting on a shelf. I thought, wow, that is pretty interesting, pointy. So what these are is they use the Hornady FTX bullet, and that's actually the same name that they use for their critical defense, is the FTX. And they're different rounds, but they mean essentially the same thing, is that there's a hollow point behind something. And their critical defense, it's more of a rubbery stuff, and this, it's more of a polymer. So what this is designed to do is to get better ballistics out of a lever action rifle, but you know, the soft tips, if you stack them in a tube, they're not going to set off the next round behind that. But I'm going to test these through handguns today because they are still hollow points and they should still perform. So our 10mm is a 150 grain FTX. That's rated at 1220 feet per second. Hornady's website says that that's through a 0-inch barrel, which is interesting. AI says that it's through a 5-inch barrel. I'm going to use my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 610 revolver, and that gives actually more than 5 inches of barrel travel there. So we should still get pretty good velocity. And our 44 Magnum, that's a 225 grain FTX. That's rated at 1410 feet per second through a 7.5-inch barrel. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my real world simulation ballistic gel test. I'm going to go through 4 layers of sweatshirt material, then 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. That's about a half representation of the density of flesh. So if we got like 16 inches in this setup, it's more like 8 inches in a real living target. And then also what I want to do is a hard barrier test. You know, one of my favorite movies is one of the Dirty Harry movies. What was that one? The third one? The Enforcer, where the woman's asking him about, you know, why does he pick 44? It's for the penetration, he says. You know, 38s can careen off windshields, all of that. What I want to do is kind of a car door body simulation test. So this is 2 different layers of 22 gauge steel. So I want to put that up in front of the gel block here, and also do a car body test to see how those do through a hard barrier. A lot of people ask, why don't I actually use an actual car door? The reason why is because there's a lot of different things in that, and when I'm doing comparisons, I want the exact same material to be hit with both calibers. So I'm going to use something generic like that. So we'll do our real world simulation test and our hard barrier penetration test, and then we'll shoot at the steel target, see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these, and recoil controllability. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 10mm auto 150 grain. One thing about these cases, they're in spec. Over the past year, I have not had any ammo in 10mm that had the cases in spec and they fall out of the moon clips, but these stay in the moon clips nicely, so I'm appreciating that. So this is rated at 1220 feet per second through a 5-inch barrel. This is actually equivalent to about a 5.6-inch barrel semi-auto from here to here, but we have some cylinder gap that's probably going to give a little bit of gas loss. So let's see how close we get to 1220 feet per second through my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 610 revolver. I'm going to do a single action because I haven't fired much but 22 in the past month. I don't want to jerk these shots. 1205, 1193, 1182, 1193, 1186. So that's about right for having a cylinder gap there. One of these primers looks punctured. That's interesting. I don't normally see stuff like that. But I am looking for bullet creep out, and I don't see any bullet creep. So that's good. That means they're in there pretty well. So I'm liking that. Our 44 Magnum, that's rated at 1410 feet per second, but through a 7.5-inch barrel. And I forgot to mention I'm using my 4 1/4 inch Smith & Wesson Model 69. So let's see how close we get to 1410 feet per second with our 44 Magnum. 1304, 1263, 1239, 1266, 1233. So that's got some recoil, and those cases are pretty stuck there. They're not stuck where I can't get them out, but they're swelling pretty good. I can pull them out manually here. So definitely our 44 Magnum, being so much heavier of a bullet at even higher velocity, is a bit more powerful. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, first up we'll do our standard real world simulation test. 4 layers of sweatshirt material followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Ideally, I want these bullets to not pass through that back rib simulation, but if they do, they can go up to 3 inches past that, and I would find that acceptable that they would not pass through an average size individual from a front on shot. So let's see what we get here with our 10mm through our real world simulation. All right. Now let's hit that with our 44 Magnum. Let's go take a look. Oh wow, big difference there in the amount of damage that we're seeing between 10mm and 44. And a lot of people would say, well, why are you even comparing those two? And here's the reason why. For a long time when I first started my channel, people would go on and on and on about how 10mm has the same ballistic performance as 44 Magnum, but you get 10 times the capacity, or whatever they would say. So I always found that kind of interesting, so I've always kind of wanted to put that to the test. And as we can see here, there's a pretty big difference between the two calibers. Through our rib simulation, 10mm, 44, both appear to be expanded really well. So even though I have all this excitement about that 44, what I'm going to say is that 10mm still looks really good overall. It's interesting. There's energy dump in this first 3 inches with both. It's actually a little bit more with the 10mm because it's a lighter bullet, so it's probably expanding out a little bit quicker and easier. We have like a kind of like a secondary channel when it first enters this main part of this main block here, like maybe part of the jacket broke off. But overall, I mean, we have good penetration, we have really good expansion, and we went to about 14¼ inches. So honestly, looking at this, I would say, you know, the power level and all that would not make a very good lever round. It would not make a very good hunting round, but it looks like it makes a fantastic self-defense round because, you know, the recoil is low and it's performing really well. Now our 44 Magnum went through that back rib simulation here. Bullet is just in that second block right there, and it looks like it is going through straight, so we're not seeing any yawing or anything like that, so that's good on that account. That's exactly what I want to see. And our penetration is fine because this would be stopped, you know, pretty much on the skin on the back side of an average size individual. So what we got going on there for penetration with our 44 is about 20½ inches. So that didn't penetrate that much. And that's one of those myths people say about 44 Magnum. It always over penetrates. Well, maybe if you used a soft point, but when you're using something that is essentially a hollow point like this, you're going to get a ton of damage, a ton of straight line penetration, a ton of so-called quote-unquote stopping power. People say that's not real. Well, that is real. There's a big difference. Every study that studies this stuff that shows there's differences between 22 and 44. Not all the same. It's not all about shot placement. So both these look really good, but our 44, that did a lot of damage. So let's put on our car door simulation and see how these do through that barrier. All right, 2 different layers of 22 gauge steel. That gives us a kind of a consistent hard barrier that might mimic an auto body part. So we'll see how these do through our hard barrier test. So the same real world simulation test after that barrier. So let's see what we get here with our 10 millimeter. And I kind of figured that would happen. Let me set that back up and we'll hit it with the 44. All right, same test with our 44 mag. Let's see how this does. Let's go take a look. All right, our impacts through our steel. Here's our 10 millimeter, and here's our 44. So our 44, it's a bigger bullet. It's making a bigger hole, obviously. And our exit holes, 10 millimeter on the bottom, 44 on top. So those went through pretty well. And we look at our rib simulation here, 10 millimeter, 44. So they appear that they are expanding even after going through that. But here's the thing, on the first 3-inch piece, it's okay damage of the 10 millimeter, but our 44 has a ton more, if you can actually see that through all that dirt. And our 10 millimeter, for what it's worth, it did pretty well. It still did some tearing. There's still a good amount of mushrooming to that bullet, it looks like, at least from this angle. And we hit our back rib simulation and stopped right at that 19 inches. Our 44, our 44 still has a bigger track and tearing than what our 10 millimeter did with no barrier. So that is apparent that that is still expanding and causing all this striation cutting. And we went to these pretty much exactly the same place that went without the barrier. We went through the back rib simulation. We got about 20.5 inches of penetration. So these are actually looking really good for being a personal defense round on the street. You know, when I first saw this ammo when it came out years ago, I thought, you know, LEVERevolution, it's supposed to be a hunting round. I didn't really think much of it in terms of that, and I still don't. It's pretty underpowered for that type of thing. If you're going to do some actual hunting, you need to get yourself some buffalo boar or something like that, not go with something like this. And yes, it is meant for a rifle, but as personal defense handgun rounds, I'm going to say I think these are pretty darn good. It's very interesting. So let's pull these bullets out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'll shoot our steel target and see what kind of practical accuracy, shootability, recoil control they have, or what, at least what I can do with them. So let's do that. All right, so here's a close-up look at our bullets going through our real-world simulation, our 10 millimeter and our 44 Magnum. So our 10 millimeter expanded out really, really big. That looks like typically what I see with like 357 Magnum critical defense and stuff like that. So it actually looks pretty good overall for its performance. Now our 44 Magnum, we actually did get some jacket separation. I found them separated. So overall our expansion actually doesn't even look as big as the 10 millimeter. I mean, it probably is technically, but the percentage there is definitely a greater percentage of expansion with our 10 millimeter. But I mean, our 44, you got a mangled bullet, you got all that energy. That's not bad performance overall. Now going through our auto body simulation here, we have our 10 millimeter and our 44 Magnum. So pretty big difference in size now going through that, because our 44 is a bit bigger than our 10 millimeter. But our 10 millimeter, it stayed consistent. It looks just like, kind of like the critical duty after going through a hard barrier. So even though it's a pretty thin jacket, it actually worked pretty well. As where our 44, you know, it started to fall apart there a little bit just from that extra force. So overall, just not that bad of performance overall looking at these. I would say on a technical standpoint, I think that our 10 millimeter did a little bit better than our 44 because we didn't penetrate quite as far. It did everything we wanted to do. So not terrible performance overall. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. I'm actually concealed carrying my 610 revolver in my pocket. You can barely see it. It's kind of funny. But I want to see what kind of shootability these things have as personal defense rounds. So double action. I'm just going to fire these off and try to hit the target as fast as I think I can hit it. And see if there's a big difference between these two. So 10mm auto. Let's see how this does. Somehow I pulled that last shot. I don't know how. But they were shooting good up until that last shot there. Could just be the moon clip hanging up. So 44 mag. Definitely more difficult to shoot. Let's see how this does for me. Let's hope I didn't blow that bolt off that target there. They'll shoot pretty good. I mean, you have to time it, but overall the recoil out of this actually isn't that bad. So I'm gonna back up from some distance and see how these shoot, because they have that tip on them that really is supposed to reduce drag and make them more efficient at distance, and that could be a benefit if you're gonna do like handgun hunting. So it might be interesting to see how these will shoot from distance. So let me back it up and shoot from some more distance with these. All right, 75 yards from the target, our hunting simulation here. So I could see how these could be good SHTF hunting rounds, because if you can deliver more velocity at distance, you know, there's more likelihood that that hollow point's going to expand versus a round that's maybe moving slower. So I'm gonna shoot these single action, try to hit the target. I'm just gonna aim center mass and see where these go. So 10mm auto, let's see where these things hit. Those things shoot pretty good. It looks like most of them are hitting a little bit low, which is actually an indication they are moving faster. A lot of people think, well, they're gonna like go higher if they're shooting faster, and it's actually the opposite for me anyways, is the way the bullets move out of the muzzle. Sometimes the recoil will cause them to shoot high. So the fact that they're shooting low actually means I'm not getting really any of that effect. They're just coming straight out. So those shot pretty good overall. 44 Magnum. I'll have to try not to flinch with these. We'll see how these things will do. Yeah, I flinched on that one. I'm hitting a little bit high, so I'm going to aim a little bit low. Huh. Hitting way over the target. Let me aim below the target. One time it hits below the target, so I was no good with this at all. And I don't think it's the ammo. I think it's just me flinching today, because to hit over and then under, I don't think these rounds were inaccurate when I was shooting them over the chronograph, so that's got to be me. So I can't hit the steel with this very well. As we're with the 10mm, hit fine. That goes back to one of those old adages, you know, you're better off with a hit with a certain caliber versus a miss with the other. So looking at this overall, I'm actually thoroughly impressed with this 10mm ammo as a self-defense round. It's definitely low powered, but here's the thing, people need to stop looking at just energy numbers alone, and people are gonna be like, well, that's just a cop-out. But it's not, because if your ammo is performing well, it's performing well. It doesn't matter what the caliber is, what the designation is, if it's performing well. And looking at this is going to have a better performance than if it were like a 40 caliber or anything like that. It's just a very light 10mm, very low recoil. I would say the recoil out of this revolver is pretty much maybe like shooting a 1911 pistol in 45. It's not that much. It's pretty easy to shoot, and I think that at the velocities we were getting, and with that ballistic performance, that's going to do really, really well as a self-defense round, and it's going to do really, really well as an SHTF round, because I'm easily able to hit stuff at distance, even out of that 4-inch barrel. The 44 Magnum, see, here's the thing, I shoot all the time. and I'm having trouble with it. So what that tells you is that, you know, in a self-defense situation, adrenaline going, most people are probably going to have a hard time reliably hitting that target with something like that. But if you did, it's going to be extremely effective. We had a huge amount of tearing and striation, cutting, and all of that. So that would be like one of those one-shot stop deal type rounds, I would guess. That did a lot of damage. So both of these are looking good for the terminal ballistics. But I would say the 10 millimeters kind of a better round for personal defense, maybe even for hunting. 44, again, this is biased because I'm shooting out of such a light revolver. If you shot that out of a much heavier revolver and you're not going to flinch, yeah, it's better overall. So interesting test. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like. Thanks for watching.